So there was animism. So this discussion of animism, and you also watched in Avatar the kind of the narrative or the kind of illustration of animism. Um, and so one question was that many of you asked is that, does this represent, is this kind of related to the stage of development of society? So in a sense, these tribes are more primitive and they are living in the forest. So they have this kind of animist, and they have less knowledge and things like that. So they have this kind of animist worldview, whereas in industrial society, we have this naturalist, materialist worldview. So is this related to the kind of development, stages of development? And to some degree, I would say that yes, because, what do we, in our daily life, what do we actually have our relations with all the time? Like, what are we actually relating to all the time? And if you're living in a forest, so actually that's literally what you're surrounded with all the time, is trees and animals and elements of the natural world and other human beings. You're not really dealing with machines. You're not dealing with roads. You're not dealing with computers. You're not dealing with cars. You're not dealing with tables, not dealing with chairs, houses. You're literally not dealing with any of these man-made things very much. So the intensity of the relationship is actually with all of the natural surroundings. That's literally what you are observing, listening, and even communicating with all the time. So now, again, if we look at the stages, right, a few weeks ago, we were looking at the Chinese cosmology and the yin-yang cosmology and everything like that. And that's also, it can be connected to a kind of agricultural society, because there's so many cycles of the summer and the winter and the day and night. And all of this is really very important when you're in an agricultural society. You have to always be following the different cycles. But it's maybe less about communicating with, trees and things like that. It's more about properly organizing and harmonizing. How you have to plant your fields. You have to make sure that everything is, well timed in the proper timing of the season. Where is the water going to flow? How are you going to plant the rice? So you have to organize things, and you have to organize it harmoniously with the different cycles and seasons and things like that. So in many ways, the analogical kind of Chinese cosmology is really tied in with an agricultural society. And the naturalist ontology, materialist one, is really very much industrial. And so here, you create your technology and you don't need to communicate with anything anymore. You don't need to communicate with, you create your environment. So it's totally your own creation. And then until recently, you didn't communicate with your machines. So you're primarily, now we spend most of our time in relationships with material things that we have created ourselves, that are man-made. We actually don't, we spend very little time in direct communication with nature. You go to the country park for a hike, and even then it hardly counts. So we can hardly even imagine what it means to be living in an environment that is not completely man-made. So, but this has real implications. It really has implications. And so the technology, the way it's designed, the way it's produced, is also by using mathematics and statistics and these scientific forms of knowledge that also do not require communicating or harmonizing with nature. So our worldview then becomes completely shaped by that. our own operating system becomes shaped by the way we operate machines. So yes, so naturalism or materialism, this kind of dualism, is very much directly inseparable from our own kind of stage of technological development. So then some of you asked, well, okay, so then what's the idea of like switching, to an animist ontology, so by through the readings, through what I've said, and also like through watching the film on Avatar, we can gain we can appreciate what is animism, and we can actually realize that there's something about animism that is it's valuable, that it has its legitimacy. But then usually often in my class, like in this class every year, when we have some kind of student feedback at the end of the semester, I realize many students, often 1/3 of the students, would say that actually after taking this course they want to be animist. But okay, but then some of you asked, so there's something really attractive about animism. But then, as some of you asked, actually, is animism really valuable? And two, is it even possible? It's actually not even possible to be an animist today. So then what, how can, if I have this sense, yes, animals, they do have their consciousness. Several of you said, dolphins have consciousness. They even care for others, somehow. So then what can we do? Because the operating system is so materialist, and yet there seems to be some value to the animism. So first of all, the reason why I say we should learn how to switch operating systems is simply so in our mind, we can mentally go into other operating systems. And then we go there and we learn something, and then we switch back. We learn different things in different operating systems, which are very valuable for us. But we have to learn how to switch back and forth. So because each operating system has its own wisdom, its own value, its own truth that is missing in the other operating systems. And so I think at some level, it's not about saying, well, this operating system is good and all the other ones are bad. But I think it's about saying, each operating system has something that's really, really valuable. So how can I learn something from it? But what can I learn from it, So that's a question for all of us. What does animism teach us? Now, first of all, we can never be an animist, or I don't think I can ever be an animist, because as I said, we don't really live in a natural environment anymore. We live in a man-made environment, especially like when we're in Hong Kong, in China, these cities, we live in massive cities and we only have man-made parks, and even when we go traveling, we go to national parks, we go to campgrounds, we go to hotels, we're all sheltered. We're always very sheltered from the natural environment. We can never really know what it means to be an animist, to be honest, to have a true sense of interaction with our natural environment. But there are things still that we can learn. In my actually, when I give this class face to face, not so in previous years, I kind of I used to try to shock the class by saying that every morning that I go onto the rooftop of my house and I talk to the flowers on my rooftop garden. So I have a rooftop garden. My wife is a wonderful gardener. It's so beautiful. And so, I would say that I talk with those flowers. and I say good morning to them. And they talk back to me, So actually, when I was saying that to the class, I was just joking. But there was something that we found out, was that when, yes, someone wrote yin yang, it's normal, haha, my aunt talks to her plants too. Well, you know what though, is that recently I actually did start talking to the plants every morning. Now, why do I do that? Because actually I haven't, I don't think that or I have no idea, but I don't think that the plants are listening to me. But I actually go around to all of them and I say good morning and I talk to them. But the reason why I do that is because somehow it actually makes me happier. It makes me happier. Like, it's just like if I say hi to if I say hello to you, and by actually saying hello to you, it actually makes me happy to say hi, and to smile. And then you smile back at me, and we'll be happier, right? So if I see somebody and I smile at them and I wave and I say good morning and I say everything like that, it actually makes me happier. So yeah, and somebody said, I talk to my plants and dog too. So it actually makes me happy. And when I do that, I have this, when I say hello and good morning to them, I have this sense of friendship and love that comes out toward those plants. I really want them, somehow. And so that really, right, it fills my mindscape with positive energies, I would say. And I don't know how those plants react. I have no idea. But there's one thing that we did notice, is that when we went on summer holidays and we asked other people, like friends or somebody else, to come and water the flowers, water the plants when we were on holidays. And then when we came back after the holiday, the plants were not in good shape. I mean, some of them were dead and most of them were still alive, but they were not in good shape, because the person who came didn't love those plants the way we did. So they just watered them and left. But my wife, she really spends so much time really caring for them and looking at them. She doesn't talk to them, but she's really caring for them and everything like that. And they actually act differently, even though we're giving them the same amount of water. So I don't know, there's something. So by learning from animists, we can actually learn to have a more valuable, a more meaningful relationship with our world. I'm not saying that you guys should start talking to plants and things like that, but but we can learn how to really be more mindful when we are in the presence of a plant, of a flower, even a rock. To really feel, to have a right, to have a more mindful relationship with those different beings. So this is just one thing at the level of our daily life. But even not only for plants, but even things, to have a more mindful relationship with objects, to be aware of their value, of their meaning, to treat them more carefully, so this is something we can learn. And another thing is, the kind of the interesting thing is that under because the current operating system is actually falling apart, it's breaking down. And so the world is gradually going to come up with a new operating system. Why do I say this? Because actually, through our technological and industrial development, we learned how to dominate nature. So we didn't need to care what nature thinks, so to speak. But now nature is talking back, so to speak, right? I mean, look at climate change. Look at all the more and more natural disasters. Look at COVID-19. Look at all of this. In fact, we are no longer in control of nature. We've lost control of nature. So dominating paradigm no longer works. So does this mean, as many of you said, well, just saying thank you to an animal before killing it, is that going to change? Is that really what we should do? Well, maybe not. But we have to learn that actually we no longer dominate nature. So we have to learn how to establish a relationship with the world of nature. So we have to completely readjust. And mentally we can understand that, but actually we still haven't learned how to readjust in our own behavior in our society, right? The operating system of society has hardly changed. So that's why we're moving more and more toward worse and worse climate change and more environmental disasters. Because our operating system, it actually largely treats concern with nature as a subjective idea. It doesn't, what really matters is, right, material control. So we're still figuring it out. But in a sense, the naturalist operating system is falling apart. What will come after is not going to be animism the way that these Indians, these Aboriginal indigenous people have. But maybe there's something we can learn. Maybe there's something we can learn from them. And actually by telling people, by suggesting that you should switch between operating systems, I actually really want to be very provocative. I really want to force everybody to really like, what? But there are a number of ways of thinking about this. Now, first of all, actually, I think we do it all the time. So for example, especially in Hong Kong and mainland China, that people will usually use both Chinese medicine and Western medicine. And sometimes they, in fact, you could go to the same drugstore, same pharmacy, and buy Chinese medicine on one side and Western medicine on the other. Or you could be practicing Qigong in the morning and go to the gym in the evening. And so Western medicine and going to the gym is actually part of the, we could say, naturalistic, materialist operating system. And Chinese medicine and Qigong, Taiji Chuan, and things like that are actually expressions of, analogical or Chinese cosmological operating system. So actually, these are different operating systems, and they're logically contradictory. They're very, very hard to reconcile. So actually, we're always switching between operating systems. So this is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is actually more as a thought experiment, okay? As a thought experiment. So so in a sense, you are deeply rooted in one operating system. And you're rooted in that one and you are committed to that one. But that doesn't mean that you can't, as a thought experiment, you can kind of try to switch your mind into another operating system to see what it's like. So you travel in that other operating system, but then you come back. You come back to your own one. So in other words, it's really, in a sense, it's learning how to see the world from another perspective. And once you've gone there and seen the world from another perspective, then you can come back and you actually understand your own operating system even better. Yeah. So now I'm an anthropologist, and that's what we do in anthropology. Is the idea is that you go and live with people who have a different culture, a different worldview, and you have to understand it very deeply and very fully. So it really influences you, and then you can learn how to use their operating system. But then you might leave that culture and come back, right? But like for me, I discovered, I came and I studied Chinese culture. I became deeply influenced by Chinese culture. In many ways, I become, my mind and even my body operates according to Chinese way of thinking. But I'm also a Westerner as well. And so I'm always switching between these operating systems all the time. So, you know, and so many people, they always think that how can we merge and combine them? But maybe you don't need to merge them and combine them. So maybe you just let Chinese thinking be Chinese thinking, let Western thinking be Western thinking, and then switch sometimes. Sometimes this one's better, another time that one is better. And sometimes materialism works better for certain things, but for other things, you know, sometimes sometimes a more spiritual approach might work better. So that's how I see the idea of switching operating systems. And once you learn how to do that, then you have a lot of freedom. In other words, because no operating system, all of them have their limitations. No operating system is capable of solving everything, of describing everything perfectly. It's all words. All these operating systems are words. And so once you switch between different operating systems, then you will realize that beyond all these, the reality is always more than any operating system. It is beyond. All these operating systems are for our limited human mind. But the universe is so much greater than any of these operating systems. So once you travel between them, then you realize there's always this space in between different operating systems, and something that can never be described. And somehow, you know, then we learn to be more humble, to be more humble, because we know that no matter what theory we have, what idea we have, it has its limits. It has its limits. Yeah. So that's how I see that. Yeah. So actually related to that, there was then this other question